It's a beautiful day. I had to step outside and have a chat with my colleague Matt and fellow psychologists to give you a walkthrough of Module 1 of Your Life After Anxiety and to share some thoughts on more helpful ways to navigate our experience with anxiety that doesn't require this unrelenting battle and struggle with something that's actually maybe trying to help us keep us safe, motivate us to live our values, and to help us figure out what truly matters in our life. So, anxiety is the number one reason why people seek out mental health services. If you've experienced a struggle with anxiety, it's quite painful. It can be very consuming and exhausting. So, my hope would be as you work through the Your Life After Anxiety program and modules, that you'll be able to shift your outlook and perspective and develop a more helpful way to navigate our internal alarm system that really is trying to help us out. But we need to have a better understanding of what anxiety is so we can start to have it work with us instead of against us. But in the end, anxiety, it really isn't the problem, but our struggle with it absolutely is. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. You might hear some birds in the background, hear some of the breeze. I just had to come outside for this chat. It's just so beautiful out here. But I hope this is helpful in your journey to your life after anxiety. Well, hello, everyone. Today we're going to walk through Module 1 of the Your Life After Anxiety program. I'm excited to have my friend and fellow psychologist, Matt, joining us for this conversation. So, Matt, what experiences or training do you have that would make you an expert to talk about anxiety or have something to offer in relation to the approach we're using here with acceptance and commitment therapy?
Anxiety is something I've worked with ever since graduate training. I've worked a lot with anxiety over the last almost 10 years. I've run a group specifically for anxiety that is based in acceptance and commitment therapy. So it's an ACT-based group focusing specifically on anxiety. So we do lots of things and learning how to deal with it, learning about what anxiety is, and different ways of trying to make our life more what we want it to be. And anxiety kind of get in the way. So anxiety has always been something that I've been interested in and worked with quite a bit.
Awesome. So professionally, quite a bit of experience leading those ACT groups, which is a great way to learn ACT and practice the skills together. And I'm curious, how about personally? Like, what's been your relationship to anxiety over the years?
Yeah, I think I would have characterized myself as a somewhat anxious kid growing up. There were lots of little things that made me nervous. Social situations were a big one for me growing up. Meeting new people, I never knew what to say. I still don't know what to say. Thankfully, I'm less anxious about that than I was as a kid. So anxiety was something that was very familiar to me. There's lots of things that we can all be afraid of. And different ways that we think about how to deal with that can be more or less helpful for us. Sometimes it actually makes things worse. And so when we come to realize that, we can actually start to deal with those fears and those worries in a lot different ways that are much more useful for us.
I think that's an important acknowledgement that anxiety is experienced by everyone. Like, thinking back as a kid, it's like, you're right, I was scared of a lot of things. The world's pretty unknown. There's a lot of uncertainties and a lot of things to be afraid of. And
just totally normal, especially when we're young. So much is new and different. And so the natural response to that is to feel somewhat afraid.
Yeah.
About that.
And that fear might help you go to your parents or learn from other people that have been there before you. It kind of compels you to go back to your kind of safe space. Make sure you're not venturing too far into the unknowns and get yourself in trouble. But it is experienced as quite normal. And yet I think a lot of our language and understanding is if you're feeling anxious, something's wrong. Like, you should feel calm. So if you're anxious, you need to get rid of that. You need to control that. There's something problematic going on.
I think that's often the message, is that if you're anxious, something's wrong. Because that's the message of anxiety, is that there's potential danger, right? So that's what our mind starts looking for when we feel feelings of fear, or if our mind starts worrying about potential things that aren't going to go well. Anxiety becomes that combination of what we're thinking about, what we're feeling. Physically, there's a lot of reactions that are taking place, and that's the experience of anxiety. And so the natural inclination is that something is wrong, or something is potentially dangerous, and I need to get away from whatever that danger is, right? That fight or flight response. I need to deal with something, even if I don't know what it is. And that's the common kind of message, and I think societal message is, you're feeling anxious, you need to do something about that, because that means something's wrong.
You're right. That is the message. And that's the function of anxiety. It's trying to alert you something might be wrong. I think what we miss is things might be working the way they're supposed to be. We're just not that aware of that. So anxiety, just as you mentioned, it really is uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and sensations, kind of cues of danger. That's normal. That's healthy. We need that. That's our nervous system. That experience of anxiety isn't the problem. That's not the disorder. The disorder shows up when it's like, I don't want to have that. I want to avoid it. I want to control it, or I'm not going to hang out with those people anymore. I'm not going to go to that party anymore. It's when we start altering our life to avoid those thoughts, feelings, and sensations that it becomes a disorder.
Yeah. The efforts that we put in to get rid of or avoid anxiety, that becomes problematic. Because anxiety, being a normal reaction to life circumstances, anxiety is just the message of what's going on. It's just that. It's just the message. It's your body's alarm system going off saying, potential danger, not even real danger. Potential danger, and which may be real danger or it may not be. And so that's why we become vigilant. We start looking. We start wondering, what do I do in this situation? Because that's your body alerting to you to this fact that there's something you need to pay attention to here. So in that way, anxiety is actually quite helpful. That it brings our attention to what's going on in the situation that we're in. And so if we blame anxiety, like, gosh, life would be so much better if I just wasn't so anxious, it's like, actually, you'd be missing a lot.
It's true.
Anxiety brings our attention to things often that are actually quite important for us. And so when we can treat anxiety that way, suddenly the experience of anxiety can be quite different.
Yeah.
Instead of, oh no, I need to get rid of this, it's, oh, what's going on in my life that needs my attention? That's a totally different experience for us.
That's the shift. And I love that idea that you brought up. It's an alarm system. That's how I view our nervous system and anxiety. It's just an alarm system. And I think there's diversity in how sensitive our alarm systems are.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, like, if you've grown up in a pretty chaotic environment, or if you've experienced abuse, your alarm system might be more sensitive.
Absolutely.
Where it's like, oh, squirrel scampers across your yard, and the lights show up, and the alarms go off, and it's like, danger, danger. And it's like, well, the squirrel's not dangerous. But because people have broke into your home, or you've gone through some rough stuff, your nervous system is just there to alert of potential danger. And then it's up to us to determine, was that just a squirrel, or was that a breeze, or is there an intruder, or is there a fire in the kitchen? Because those are dangerous, but our anxiety alarm response is the same often across those situations. And it's up to us to determine, we need to act here, or was it a squirrel? And we need to get more comfortable with the experience of that alarm going on. That alarm isn't disordered. It feels upsetting and scary.
Absolutely.
We want it to go away, but we actually want alarms in our home to alert us.
They're really, really useful. And there's some learning that goes on with us too. Like you mentioned, when we have experiences that are really painful and hurtful to us, especially early on in our lives, that alarm system becomes more sensitive, because your brain, your nervous system have learned, we need to be on high alert. There is real danger. And so the process of working with that throughout our lives is we have to now learn that danger isn't present. And so to do that, we have to allow the alarms to go off, without trying to shut them down and say, I know there's no danger here. And so here's what I'm going to do, even though the alarms are going off. And that makes it so much harder in some situations. But as we do that, our nervous system actually will learn that, okay, this isn't as dangerous as I've been thinking.
Yeah, we're okay here.
Yeah, an example of that is I was in a car accident a number of years ago, and it was in a place that was on my regular route to work, from my house to where I was working. And so I passed it every day to and from work. And immediately after this accident happened, every time I passed that spot, huge anxious reaction, big response. It's like, yep, it happened right there. That was really scary. I wasn't hurt, thankfully, but our car was totaled, and we had to deal with all of that. So there was all these memories, right? Vivid memories, some of them, and just the emotional response was really large. But over time, as I passed that every day, that reaction started to lessen and lessen and lessen. But for me, when I really noticed that, oh, actually, I'm not really noticing a big reaction, 6 months.
Took 6 months.
Took 6 months for me, right? That's not going to say that's what it is for everybody, but 6 months before I could actually look at myself as I passed it. Oh, I'm not feeling afraid of that spot anymore. Yeah. I wasn't afraid of it, like thinking wise. I knew I was safe. I'm driving okay. Traffic's fine. But emotionally, that emotional response took 6 months for me to teach myself that that spot's not dangerous.
So really being patient with ourselves. This takes time.
It does take a little bit. It's a learning process. It's a bit of a conditioning process.
It is, yeah.
To teach ourselves that actually this isn't dangerous, like I've been telling myself.
And the biggest thing you threw in there is you were approaching those situations that evoked those sensations and memories.
I didn't take an alternative route to work.
Right, which is what your mind is going to
route.
recommend, is why don't we avoid that? And it's the avoidance of those situations that actually maintains anxiety and may even increase it.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where we start with module 1 is we introduce this idea of kind of you fell in this anxiety pit, you're trying to dig yourself out, and what are all the shovels and strategies we use to try to control anxiety? And probably the biggest one is what you mentioned is we try to avoid those situations.
It's the natural response, right? That's actually one of the messages of anxiety is get away from this. This is. But oftentimes we find anxiety to be the thing I need to get away from. And that's where we take ourselves deeper and deeper, because guess what? Anxiety goes wherever you go. Yeah. We don't actually ever get rid of anxiety. So that's a losing battle. It's an impossible task to give ourselves. We can avoid some situations that prompt anxiety, and in some cases that would be fine. If I found an alternative route to work, probably would have been fine.
Probably not a big deal.
But every time I passed that spot, I'll bet it would have taken longer than 6 months for that emotional response to die down and change. And so, the approaching of difficult situations where I know I'm safe, and I'm trying to teach myself that it's actually okay to be here and to do what I'm doing. That's what's going to make the difference over time.
Yeah, that's it. And you referenced like the outward situation, that's part of it. But the big thing is that alarm system is built in. And you're right, that's what we start to avoid. It's that fight or flight response goes off, and we become scared of that. Not necessarily the fire in the kitchen, it's that the alarm system went off. And so we work really hard to make sure that alarm doesn't go off. We're so focused on trying to control that, we're not even aware of the fire in the kitchen, or if there's a wonderful dinner party going on, or
better yet, in my mind, so we don't use the kitchen.
Oh yeah,
you might set the alarm off.
Yeah, don't cook anymore.
Oh, now I have to eat takeout forever.
Yeah, because we're afraid of the alarm.
Yeah,
not even the fire. That is how intense anxiety is. So our mind's going to recommend all these strategies to try to control it. Because that's really where this journey starts. Is let's recognize how a problem-solving mind is trying to fix the anxiety problem by trying to get rid of it, suppress it, avoid it, control it. And people have done that for a long time. And if it worked, they probably would have figured it out. But the reality is that tends to keep us stuck. So the alternative is to kind of open up to that experience practice feeling the alarm, and like you did, is approach it. And a lot of the ways we do that is through mindfulness practices. And so I have got a mindfulness exercise before every module. And sometimes people tell me, like, oh, I love the concepts, but can I just skip the mindfulness practice? What's your pitch for it? It's like, you can't skip that. We actually need that. Like, how is mindfulness helpful in helping us overcome anxiety?
I find mindfulness practices as a way to turn toward those difficult experiences. Because if it's like the alarm's going off and it's like, oh, I really don't want that, we'll turn the other way and try and block it out. Yeah. Mindfulness teaches us how to actually turn toward our experiences and take a good look at it, where I can stand in my kitchen and look at the alarm going off and say, yes, the light is flashing. That sound is buzzing and it's really loud, and I'm okay. It's okay. It's just the alarm going off. So mindfulness teaches us how to do that in real time. We can share this idea, and people are like, yeah, that sounds great. But then when you go to do it, that alarm is so compelling to try and get away from it. We have to learn to turn toward it and actually engage in being present with difficult and sometimes painful experiences.
So mindfulness, the objective is not to not feel anxious or get rid of it or control it or necessarily
quite the opposite.
Yourself. Yeah, it's actually helping you develop skills to get more comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah. And it's a skill. It's a set of skills to be able to be present and notice something without running away from it, which is our natural impulse.
It is.
So it's a way of taking a look and saying, no, oh, I have the impulse to run away here. And I'm not going to. I'm just going to notice what that impulse feels like. And that's how the impulse can actually start to change. So it's a mechanism to start to change and teach ourselves that I don't have to react and act on every single message and cue that I receive. Instead, I can just watch it, see it for what it is, and then decide what to do with it. So it gives us that space to kind of pause and look at our experiences in some new and more helpful ways.
That's it. So that's the foundational practice. And so a lot of the work behind acceptance and commitment therapy is mindfulness work. That is the skills that are needed. So there isn't like, I just want to skip that and move on, start building the house. It's like, no, actually, this is the foundation.
It's the foundation.
This is what we're needing. We need to grow that capacity. Actually look at the kitchen, hear the alarms, and see if there's fire or not. This is the amazing thing with anxiety, is it's saying, this is so scary, don't even look. Don't even assess if there's real danger or not. That actually makes us more vulnerable and puts us at more risk, and we're even less in control. But we need to be able to develop that capacity for when the alarm's going off, we can still walk in the room. It's blaring and it's loud and it's scary. We can accurately assess what is going on. And it might be there's a kitchen fire. It might be there's just a battery that is low. And we can replace that. We don't really know until we can stay in that space. And that is what mindfulness helps us to develop.
Yeah. There might be times we want to act right on those impulses that come in. If there's actual danger, if there's something like, that we need to act on, put a fire out, then we can see that. And it's really fast, too. Your brain, your nervous system is adapted to act quickly in dangerous situations. When it's not dangerous, we need to be able to slow things down. And mindfulness teaches us how to do that. Slow it down and actually say, I know where I want to go, and it's not where my nervous system is telling me to go. Okay? Sometimes it's in a very different direction. And so now I can take small steps in that direction. The more I do that, the more those steps become more feasible, more easy for us to do. And the alarm stops going off as often. We have to give it time and practice.
Yep. So that's what we're inviting people to do, is kind of go against the message of our nervous system that helps us survive. It keeps us safe. And we're inviting people to look at that, get more comfortable. But that fight or flight reaction where our heart's racing and our breathing accelerates and we're trembling and we're feeling really nervous, that in and of itself is not a disorder. That isn't the problem. It's
everything's
our
right
struggle with it. Yeah,
it's working. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
And I think our challenge is as mental health awareness has increased, which is wonderful, stigma has gone down, but our understanding of what mental health is still pretty low. So it's like, I'm more comfortable saying I've got anxiety. I don't really know what that means.
What to do with it, because the social message is still, you should do something about that and get rid of it. It should not be showing up here.
Yeah.
And actually, sometimes it should.
Yep. So we get stuck with these clinical terms where I've got this anxiety thing I need to get rid of, but we don't have anxiety, just like we don't have other emotions. Like, it seems like it sounds okay to say I have anxiety. It's like, okay, but if we said I have fear or I have sadness, it's like, that doesn't seem to make as much sense. Like, we feel fear, we feel sad, but it's like, oh, I have depression. Okay, I have anxiety. That makes sense. Those are really just clinical words to describe a cluster of thoughts, and feelings, and sensations. But we get stuck with that and almost become scared of having anxiety. So the thought of I have anxiety actually activates our alarm system. And now we need to get afraid of that and work on resolving this anxiety thing that's making us feel anxious. And we just like circle this alarm system.
Get ourselves stuck in. So yeah, if we can step out of that and say, oh, look, I am feeling anxiety.
Yeah.
That's a feeling that I'm having right now.
Right now, in this moment.
And it comes and it goes, like every other feeling. And if I can look at it that way, now I'm not stuck in that cycle of trying to get away from it. It's a feeling like other feelings that come and go and change all the time.
It's the trying to get away from it that robs your life of purpose.
Absolutely.
Devoting our energy and our time and our focus to not feel anxious is a full-time job. And maybe a part-time job on top of that.
And doesn't get the results we're looking for in the long run.
It's never ending. There's no payout. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. And then you start to feel like, what is wrong with me that I can't get a handle on this? And so there is another pathway forward, but it is a little different than our nervous system suggests, what the messages society share, and what our mind would recommend, which is basically our mind says control everything. But there's some things you can control, like the color of the shirts we selected today. We chose that. But how we're feeling, we don't choose that.
It comes and it goes, mostly on its own, because it's prompted by what's going on in our life at that moment, right? If I walk into a situation that's potentially dangerous, my nervous system's going to alert me to that. If I'm having thoughts about a painful memory, my nervous system's going to alert me to that as well. So the situation is internal as well as external. The emotional message is just a cue to let us know, hey, that's happening here. You should pay attention to that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I might pay attention to it just for a moment. Just say, oh, yeah, there's that memory. That's actually not happening right now. Yeah. So I can go on with my day. That memory might show up a few times, but that's all it is. It's in my mind. And so the emotion itself is just alerting me to whatever's going on inside of me, outside of me, and I get to choose what sort of response I'm going to give to that. I'm going to pay much attention to it. Sometimes I ought to.
Yep.
And other times I may choose not to, because it's really not relevant to what I'm trying to pursue right now.
I love that language you use, that anxiety is a message. So as you talked about that, and it's alerting you, I thought of it, it's just like a notification on the phone.
Absolutely.
Some of those are, oh, this is an important message from your partner. You need to pick up your kid. They're at school. They got a bloody nose. It's like, that's an important message. Sometimes it's a notification that you have unused apps. And it's like, not that important.
Not going to deal with that right now.
Yeah, not right now. Maybe I'll check out tonight when I got nothing else going on or waiting in the line. But this emotion, it's a notification. It's a text message. It's an email. It's information. Sometimes it's like, I don't want to check my phone or check my email, because what if it's a scary message? It might be, or it might be like, hey, you got a refund. There's some money sitting for you. But it's the not knowing I don't want to check it that actually makes it bigger and scarier. And so it is important to check what the message is trying to say. And then, like you said, determining, I need to do something about this right now. If so, let's take care of it. If not, maybe later. Or some of these are not that relevant.
And often the struggle is the anticipation of a text message. Like, I just know something's going to show up. And so and I'm worried about it all day, and it may not even show up, but I am worrying and thinking about it and just hoping that it won't.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I'm experiencing that without it even being there.
Yeah.
And often anxiety can feel a lot like that. But I'm worried about a danger that's never actually going to show up.
Yep.
Or if it does, it's going to be brief and not that relevant to my daily life.
Yep.
And that keeps anxiety present because I'm worried about feeling afraid when it does show up. So the result is I feel afraid all day long.
Yep. I'm glad you brought that up. I wasn't planning on even talking about that, but often fear is an emotional experience in this moment, to danger in this moment. Anxiety is often the anticipation of fear in the future.
Very forward looking. It's
so
what's
forward.
coming. I'm afraid of what's happening. It's almost like when you have an exam and the anticipation of the exam is the worst part, right? Like the 2 days before where you're trying to cram and get yourself ready and you're feeling so stressed about it and walking into the exam just like, oh no. But then once you sit down to the exam, you've done the studying and you just get in the rhythm and you get it done, and it's like, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But I was worried about it for all this time leading up to it. That's the experience of anxiety often. It's anticipating what's coming, and what's coming isn't as bad as what my mind is telling me it is.
Typically not.
And often, so it's that lead up that's actually the worst part,
yep,
rather than the experience itself.
So I think that is important to know, and that's one of the functions of our mind. And so in some ways, anxiety is a byproduct of our mind. It's trying to help us be safe now and control everything we can now, and so it projects in the future. How could we control scenarios in the future? But that's infinite and unpredictable, and there's a lot of dangerous stuff out there. So it spends a lot of time trying to anticipate and plan, and that's time-consuming, it's exhausting, but it's anxiety-provoking. But it's, again, our mind's effort to try to feel in control and safe.
And not all of that's bad. So like you got an exam coming, that anxiety is actually going to promote you studying and preparing for it. So that's not bad. We should spend some time on that. It's like, wow, thank you, anxiety, for alerting me and driving me, giving me that motivation to do something as part of anticipating that.
Yeah.
It's when we don't have anything to do, there's no preparation needed, and my mind, I can even know that that's not likely to happen, but I'm spending all that extra time and energy preparing for something that's really not likely to happen at all, or that's in the past and it's not going to happen again. Then we're spending a lot of time and energy on a message that's not really relevant.
Maybe we can end on that piece. I love what you brought up, that anxiety is actually trying to help you prepare for that exam. And the more I've thought about anxiety, is I'm really only anxious about things that matter to me, things that I care about. And it's like I'm the most anxious about my parenting, probably because I care the most about raising my kids appropriately and meeting their needs. So I worry about that a lot. And so we take that idea of, well, I'm worrying about it, and I feel anxious about it, therefore I'm doing something wrong. Another way to look at that is I worry about this a lot because it matters. Absolutely. And so anxiety, in a lot of ways, is just shining a spotlight on your values and what matters to you the most. And we'll touch on values in some of the later modules. But for me, anxiety, once we shift our relationship from, I got to get rid of it, it's the problem, it's destroying my life, to, wow, it's actually preparing me to take action and reminding me that there's some things in life that really matter, some things that don't. Like the color of this chair, I don't really feel that anxious about it because it doesn't matter. But relationships in my life, my work, helping clients, I feel anxious about that. I worry about that quite a bit because it's important. So feeling anxious doesn't mean there's a problem. It's that this matters to you.
And it's worth your time and effort, right? So it's drawing your attention. That's what our mind is focused on, is helping us get through life in a way that works for us. And so anxiety can help us focus on those things too. So that's why we don't want to get rid of it. Nope. It is not a problem here. In fact, as you develop a different relationship with your emotions and anxiety in particular, it can now be something that's going to be helpful for you. Your nervous system's number one job is to keep you alive and keep you safe. But as we go throughout our lives, there's going to be moments that our are actually potentially dangerous. When I walk to the edge of the cliff, my nervous system sure lets me know that that's a really large drop and you should not go any further. That's exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's keeping me alive. And, as we start to really focus on the things that matter the most in our lives, it's going to also point us to, you should do something about that. And it's going to help actually produce the energy to do those things. And that's where it becomes really fun.
Activating. I love that. Well, I appreciate this chat. It's fun to be out in the sunshine and maybe a little bit more casual conversation. And I just noticed a little bit of response with the squirrel climbing next to the tree. But I took a look at it, and the squirrel stared me in the eyes, and we agreed that we're okay. We just kept it going. But I'm glad I had that oriented response. Like, there's something climbing on this tree. Right? Let's take a look. And so even in this conversation, I felt that little anxious response. Something was happening in my environment that I needed to attend to, and it's okay. So we're going to keep this conversation. But I hope you find this helpful to think about anxiety in a different way, that our objective with Your Life After Anxiety is not to get rid of it. Anxiety is not the problem. Our struggle with it is, and how we've approached it does get in the way. And all those desires to control it or avoid or escape from it are going to keep us stuck. But I feel like Matt shared a lot of really helpful insights on how to approach this, and then the skills we need to start to do that more effectively. And a lot of those start with mindfulness. So thanks for joining me, Matt, and look forward to our next chat.
Sounds good.